Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Sara.
You're Jonathan Ofir. You are Jewish and grew up in an Israeli kibbutz. Now you live in Denmark as a professional musician. You have long been protesting against the Gaza war. I would like to understand why, so I have some questions for you. Is Israel committing a genocide in Gaza?
I would say yes. I'm not a jurist. I am not a genocide expert. But the mass of qualified assessment by the experts and by a mass of organizations, human rights organizations, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, the UN, UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, and countless experts, it is saying this. That's to answer this particular question that you ended up with. There are now, there are some experts that have been hesitant. Like, for example, Omer Bartov, Israeli-American professor at Brown University. He's one of the most respected genocide and Holocaust scholars. In the New York Times in November 2023, he was still hesitant about the genocide. He said, it seems like there's ethnic cleansing and maybe crimes against humanity and stuff like this, but he was hesitant about the genocide. The genocide declaration of the crime. But in June last year, he came in a very long article in The Guardian, and he explains why he's no longer there. This is a genocide.
So this was in 2024, because
yes.
we are now in August 25.
Yeah. And now, on a Dutch outlet, they've done interviews with leading genocide experts and found that there is this huge consensus now. People like Martin Shaw, Melanie O'Brien, who is also who is actually leading the Association of Genocide Scholars. This is an association with over 500 members in this area. She's saying this is a genocide. This is what it is. And it's quite interesting to see, she's on the one hand she's saying, things are what they are. Whether you call it, you determine, you don't determine, they're exactly what they are. But on the other hand she's saying, those people who are saying, there's some who argue, let's not call it a genocide, it's difficult to prove, let's just say war crimes and let's just say crimes against humanity, right? You kind of back out and say it's easier. But she's saying, no, there's actually a very specific purpose to determining a genocide. Also, in the legal sense, it's also because the Genocide Convention has very special protections. It is the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide.
It's a bit late afterwards.
It has a preventive nature and spirit. And we all know why, because if you take some years to find out if it was, then maybe you'll find out it was, but you didn't prevent it. And the never again idea from the convention is from the 1984, in the wake of the Holocaust and the never again and all
1948.
that. Yeah, 1948. So if you say never again, but you have to wait, then it will happen again. And I think
people will die.
Obviously. And some people are still here in Denmark. Actually, Denmark is very much living on this idea. We have to wait because a case has been presented to the ICJ in December 2023.
ICJ, International
Court of Justice by South Africa against Israel, charging genocide. The court accepted the case, but it did not finally rule because it takes some years. But Francesca Albanese, whom I helped host here as well, the Special Rapporteur on Palestinian human rights in occupied territories, the UN Special Rapporteur, she says, but this is just a wrong reading of the Genocide Convention. Because if you look at what the court said, it recognizes a risk for genocide. And the Israel apologists are trying to twist this in all kinds of ways to say, no, they didn't say. They pointed to a risk. That's what they did. That's why they even took the case. Because if you don't see the risk for genocide, then there is no merit for the case. Okay, they took the case, and this is something that they don't have to do when they take a case. They issued preliminary measures, temporary measures.
At the International Court of Justice.
Yes. 6 points, including humanitarian aid, which has been a consistent point, which they had to repeat these orders and change them a little bit, but repeat them in March.
What orders?
And May 2024. The orders are things like ceasing to commit acts which may constitute genocide.
So they are orders to Israel?
Yes, and allowing humanitarian aid at scale, punishing the incitement to genocide and things like this. They change a little bit the points in the repetitions, but at this point with humanitarian aid, it has been consistent and repeated, and Israel did not abide. At a certain point in April 24, it went a little bit up, and then it went down again. If you look at what Israel has allowed overall, I've made a collection of the UN data on trucks coming in. It has allowed about, in my assessment, 22% of what was before October 23, which was under a siege. It was a minimum of just over 500 trucks, 550 trucks a day, maybe. And that accumulation is what makes you see these dying, starving babies today. It's not an accident. It's not by chance. It's not because of these steal aid, and yeah, there is a whole lot of messy things happening under this situation. Not least including what happens in those death traps, which are the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, aid distribution centers. So there are these 4 centers for over 2 million people, and of course you get starving people, trampling each other in those 8 minutes that they can get. I don't have to go into much detail here.
Yeah, they're even using children getting the aid on top of their head, so they get killed by the aid.
Oh, that too. And there's daily massacres in those centers. They're being communicated with bullets and artillery. It's absolutely horrific. So dozens are dying a day just by trying to get their food. Okay, so is it a genocide? It's a genocide. But in relation to what we were supposed to do already by the risk, pointing to the risk of genocide, if we saw a risk of genocide, and it's a serious risk.
We being the rest of the world.
Yeah, here in Denmark or anywhere.
Yes.
We should have acted like the court did, but the court can only order. Here and anywhere where you actually supply material to Israel, you supply economy, you supply trade agreements, you supply diplomacy, all of that.
And even weaponry, no?
Weapons. Here we supply weapons and parts for the F-35 jets, which are bombing Gaza. We should have stopped. It should have stopped. We knew. We know what the mechanisms are to stop it. Even if it wasn't determined a genocide, if you saw that there were systemic war crimes, and that's absolutely, like, even if you're still hesitant about the genocide, certainly war crimes, you should have stopped there. It's systemic. So we didn't do that, so the world is failing on its pledge to never again that was made after the Holocaust. Yeah, absolutely failing. It has failed. The language that the ICJ has used for these measures, for these orders, is preventing irreparable harm to the Palestinians in Gaza under the Genocide Convention. So if you don't allow them aid at scale, if you give them less than 25% consistently, and they're wholly dependent on it, much more than before October 23, because their fields have been decimated. They don't have self-sufficiency. They can't even fish now in the sea. They've blocked the sea. So they have nothing. They're wholly dependent upon it. So of course you're going to create irreparable harm. Those babies will die and they won't come back to life. So that's why. That's also an answer to the first question.
And these people can't get out either, can they? They can't just leave the Gaza Strip.
There was a point in last year, 2024, when the Rafah crossing over to Egypt was open for people going out. Open. I've been trying to help some of these cases. I know the details of it, what it takes to get one person out.
Very costly, wasn't it?
Lots and lots of money. I'm talking about like close to between $6,000 and $10,000 for a person to pay this. They had this organization which had some shady thing, you know, an Egyptian organization, some connections to the Egyptian regime and stuff like that. They could make the papers. You could have other papers. I knew one person who tried to get out, got out eventually. You know, he came once, they said, oh, you're missing this paper. He came twice. I think the fourth time, my suspicion was that they're just trying to get more money out of him at the border. But anyway, fourth time, he made it out, got to Egypt, you know. But the assessment is, from reports of the time, was that, if I remember correctly, about 105,000 people managed to get out that way, right? 105. Okay, for those who don't know the Gaza demography, by October 2023, I can see by the population registry, we are at about 2.25, something like that, million, okay, people. Now, so minus 100,000 there, and we should say minus roughly 100,000 dead, like directly killed. And why I'm saying this is, but the numbers are enormously hard to get precise, but not because of what the Israel apologists are saying. That there are Hamas, the Hamas-controlled health ministry is giving us figures that are unreliable. No. The figures have been reliable historically. USA relies upon them. Israel relies upon them. We know it. There is a track record. They are conservative. They used to be historically very close to other UN estimates, and everyone knows this. Everyone, a serious person, knows that it's only propaganda to say that they are inflated. What we know now is that they are a huge undercount. Yes. And according to the Lancet estimation some months ago, they estimated that they are about 41% undercounted. So if I just count, make the math of, now we are over 62,000 directly counted deaths. Yes. There's still people under the rubble. I'm not even counting another maybe 10,000. Okay, so that, and you add this 41%, I think you're at about 87,000, yeah? And then it's, under the genocide itself, it's very hard to count. It's very hard to reach places. At a certain point, we'll be counting properly. But I'm saying we are probably, nearing the 100,000. So the Gaza population is probably reduced now to close to, let's say, 2 million, okay? Something like that, just over 2 million. And what you asked me why I'm opposing it. It's not like I would start opposing this if I thought it was a genocide, but I wouldn't oppose it if I didn't think it was a genocide. I've been into this in detail, writing about it several times a month, publishing articles, and mostly in Mondoweiss and other places as well, on this, on the Israel-Palestine issue, since 2008, looking at it closely from 2014, but publishing more from 2016. So for a decade, I've been looking at these things, and
because it was bad already.
Yeah, and you saw the pattern. I mean, 214, the onslaught of the summer 214. That was a point for me, which kind of got me, up and speaking.
What
publicly.
onslaught was that?
That was the summer onslaught that started in late June, or just around the beginning of July, and went on until August.
And what happened?
About 51 days. So at that point, about 2,200 people were killed. It followed another similar onslaught, which one thought couldn't get worse. That was back in 2008-9.
Is this Israel attacking the Palestinian areas?
Yes, this is Israel attacking, bombing Gaza. Israel always has a pretext for this happened, and often it has actually been Hamas that has been holding the ceasefire quite well, and then Israel is attacking, and then there are rockets, and then you say, oh, it's because of the rockets from Hamas. Okay, never mind didn't that. In 2008-9, that was around, I have to remember, I think around 1,500 killed. Okay. In 2014, with the 2,200 killed, it was, if I remember correctly, it was like 551 maybe children out of them. Okay, but already in 2008 and 9, it was the end of 2008 to 9, there was a report about what was going on there, what they were doing there.
Who made the report?
The UN had a fact-finding mission headed by Judge Richard Goldstone. He's known internationally. He was in the tribunal on Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. Very known, respected jurist, Jewish, with a daughter living in Israel, and they came out with a devastating report, about wanton destruction of infrastructure, chicken farms, what have you, besides the direct deaths, indiscriminate bombings. And there is a summary of what was being done there in 2008-9, and they called it a campaign of punishment, humiliation, and terrorization of the civilian population in Gaza. And they related to a doctrine that is called the Dahya doctrine. This is something that Israel actually officially launched in 2008, so that year. It was declared by the former Chief of Staff, Gadi Eisenkot, at the time he was head of Northern Command. It was drafted by the Israeli Institute for National Security Studies, this military intelligence think tank, connected to Tel Aviv University, by the way. Gabi Siboni from there, and so it was a real doctrine. They said this is a real doctrine, and it's based on the 2006 bombing of the Dahya quarter in Beirut. So there, in the so-called Second Lebanon War, many Hezbollah families were living. So they leveled the Dahya quarter, and it was like this collective punishment, and they're saying, this is what's going to happen. This is the Dahya doctrine. Ostensibly they say, wherever you fire rockets from, we don't care where it is. The whole area is considered a military base from now, right?
Wow.
This indiscriminate destruction and
groupthink.
Yeah, it's called literally disproportionate destruction.
Speaking of pretext, as you said before, what role does 7 October attacks from Gaza into Israel play in what is now going on and has been going on since then? what role do the attacks back then on 7 October 2023, what role has that been playing since then?
The October 7th attacks led by Hamas, but also enacted by, I think, 4 other organizations, some of which are like secular, connected to not Islamic in that way. This was used as a pretext for genocide. It was quite easy to see how this was being formulated. Okay? Just 2 days after the 7th, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, was saying, we are closing everything. Electricity, water, fuel, food, everything. We are dealing with human animals, and we'll act accordingly.
Yeah.
The head of the COGAT, the occupation, they call it the Occupation Civilian Authority, but it's not. It's a military authority. The commander of that authority.
Yeah, because how can you have an occupation that's not military?
It's the occupying chief of occupation in Gaza, or in general, also in the West Bank. He was repeating that. He repeated that. Human animals.
Wow.
Closing everything.
And it really sounds like it comes from their heart when they say this. This seems to be like part of basic Israeli thinking, that the Arabs, that the Palestinians are human animals. It seems to be like a basic way of viewing them. No?
I think there was an underlying dehumanization. What you are saying, yes, that has existed all through, that they are just lesser human beings. But now it was taken into a much more explicit level. And on the one hand, those who sought to defend and say, oh no, it's not a declaration of genocide, he's just talking about Hamas. But try and think about it. So he's saying, we're closing everything for everyone.
Yeah.
So how can he say we're fighting just Hamas? No, he's fighting, it was very clear. And this is not the only thing. You have to look at these statements as a grouping of statements. So you've had Netanyahu count several times, I've reported about several of these times, use the Amalek definition or euphemism. It's a biblical euphemism. Everyone who studies the Bible, it's already in the book of Samuel, and it's in different books there. But there's these Amaleks, this old nation thousands of years ago, and they annoyed they annoyed the Israelites. So eventually, the decree was, you mow them down, annihilate them down to babies and cattle. And that is the legacy of it. So when Netanyahu says, we remember the Amalek and we did not forget, and so on. And so he's
basically referring to mowing down.
Yeah, it's everyone. It's down to the cattle. The cattle can be militant. Okay, it's down to everyone and everything.
Every living being.
Yeah.
I'm always like, when Israel talks about we want Hamas closed down and out, it always sounds to me like what they're really saying is they want all Palestinian resistance stopped. Because now it's Hamas, back in the day it was PLO, and like back in the day, in the 80s, they had just gotten rid of, I don't know how, Israel got rid of the PLO soldiers, that were guarding, that were the military presence around the two encampments, Sabra and Shatila, that were then slaughtered after the Palestinian military wing had somehow left the area. And it sounds like Israel is actually putting that as a demand, that Palestinians are not allowed to put up any resistance to what I wonder, is Israel actually a European colonialist project?
It's certainly a colonialist project. I would say more specifically, it's a settler colonialist project. Whether it's European, I think it's certainly started out as such, but it morphed into a more complex settler colonialist project. But that we can talk about another time or later. Mm-hmm. But relating to what you were saying about the resistance in 1982, mm-hmm. So 1982 was the invasion of Lebanon by Israel, and the Sabra and Shatila massacres, they were actually conducted directly by the Phalanx, these Christian Maronites militias, which were allied with Israel because they had the common enemy, the Palestinians, right? And Israel, but Israel didn't just let them do it. It more than let them do it. It surrounded the two camps. It lit the camps in the night, so this could go on for a day and a half. Everything was under the protection of Israel.
So it enabled it.
So it enabled these massacres. There are different estimates of the deaths, thousands, maybe a couple of thousands, up to 3,000. Difficult to know exactly, but this the entry to Lebanon. This invasion was described by an Israeli military analyst of Ner Yaniv as anticipating or countering a Palestinian peace offensive. The problem with the PLO at the time was not its militancy, but that it was approximating the two-state solution, what we know now as the two-state solution.
And Israel doesn't want the two-state solution, does it?
It was something that it certainly didn't want PLO getting legitimacy for, because eventually the declaration by PLO of its adoption of the two-state solution, rather than attempt to free Palestine from the river to the sea, as we say, was declared in 1988. But they were on the way to it already from the late 70s. They were on the way to saying, we
can share.
You need to make compromises. We see that maybe the goal of liberating all of Palestine is just not realistic. We're going for the 22% of historical Palestine. And
that's quite a humble goal.
Yeah, I don't think that Ilan Pappé, the Israeli historian, he points this out, that it seems that people don't readily understand what kind of a compromise that is already in itself.
Yeah.
Because if you see where Israel declared itself, if you look at its declaration of independence, and it's talking about the UN partition plan from half a year before, we're talking about 15th of May 1948, right? Mm-hmm. So there was the UN partition plan before, allocated 56% of historical Palestine to being a Jewish state, 44% for being a so-called Arab state, right? Mm-hmm. So 56% to people who are at that point own less than a third of the population, owning less than 7% of the land. Already, what are you talking about? This is really unfair.
And right? Coming from abroad.
And mostly coming from abroad.
Yeah. For European
mostly having just arrived.
Yeah.
So they gave him that. And then Israel is starting already the expansion before the declaration of the state, then continuing afterwards, and then ending up in 1949 with 78%, not 56, but 78% now, right? And the Palestinians, the non-Jews, are left with this 22%. And then, so when PLO, we're jumping again to 1988, when the PLO declared, okay, we accept this 22%.
Yeah.
Then it was a problem for Israel again. We didn't actually intend, for them to accept that. This is just like we don't want that. And Abba Eban, the late foreign minister of Israel, he said in 1969, after Israel expanded 4 times, but took over the what we call the Palestinian occupied territories, Gaza and the West Bank. So he said in 1969, those lines before June 4th, 1967, they represent for us somewhat of a memory of Auschwitz, right? So you're going to create a second Holocaust if you demand that that actually happens, that they get the 22%.
Oh.
So this has been, yeah, it's been Israel has been fighting to not give that 22%. And every time the Palestinians were trying to negotiate about getting their 22%, Israel was demanding, no, we want more than our 78%. We have our settlements, we want to surround them, we want Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, and all of that. And always the Palestinians had to accept less of the pizza that they were being offered. It was always getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, speaking of the settlers, there's this impression that mainstream Israel pretends that the settlers are some sort of extremists, but really they seem to just be like at the frontier. They are the frontier pushing forward, aren't they, to gain more territory for all of Israel?
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm just this guy sitting with you in Copenhagen, but you know, I read
who grew up in a kibbutz.
Who grew up in a kibbutz, true, and that's actually very interesting because I read what the leader of the kibbutz movement has been saying.
What did he say?
Last year. So, early last year, he had a big interview in Haaretz, Israeli newspaper.
Yeah, liberal newspaper.
Yeah, liberal newspaper. Very long interview. And he's saying the right wing is correct. They're right.
And
they learned from us, he's saying, they learned from us that how you take over land. And they are correct also in their assessment that every place that you leave without taking over, without settling it, the Arabs will take it over. We have to go to every hilltop. You know, he sounds completely like one of those so-called extremist settler leaders.
And this is the kibbutz movement, which is often seen as like a leftist, liberal, progressive movement.
Yeah.
So this is what passes for a progressive, peaceful Israeli movement, and he says this.
He says this, and he admits that after October 7, 2023, there's also been a movement across the board, not least from the kibbutz movement, which has traditionally been considered, yes, the leftist, labor Zionist part of society. He says it's moved. He literally says that people there want to see Gaza erased. A lot of people. They can't suffer to hear Arabic, and they do not think that people on the other side are good people. This is a quote. And they want to see Gaza erased. Okay? So I've heard what he's talking about from these kibbutzniks, and some of them keep talking about it. We've heard like it on mainstream Israeli television. After October 7, Avidah Bachar from Kibbutz Be'eri, he said, we need to make a final solution.
That sounds like something we've heard before.
Absolutely. Final solution, do not leave stone upon stone, eradicate, kill them all. Nothing is between Kibbutz Be'eri and the Mediterranean Sea. Finish it off. In the studio, when he was saying it in December 23, was Yossi Peled. Old general, I think he's around in his 80s now. Let me see. He's in his mid-80s. He was a Holocaust survivor. He got out of Belgium at age 4. Okay, he was sitting there, and I was wondering, what do you say? That must ring a bell.
Yeah.
He was totally heartwarmed. He thought that was just fantastic. He congratulated this Avidah Bachar for being so steadfast and, you know, so positive, and it's just absolutely amazing. Another one from Be'eri, Ayelet Boyom. I recognize. I just want to be fair and say, okay, these people lost members of their family.
On similar
Avi Dabaha, he lost his wife and his son. I think it was a teenage son. Ayelet Boyam, she lost her husband and a teenage son. I recognize that. But she said, it's interesting to like look closely at what she said. She said, she was asked a month later, will you return to Be'eri? And she said, I will return to Be'eri when the last of the Palestinians there is annihilated.
Wow, where is this place exactly?
It's just a few kilometers from Gaza. It's part of the so-called Gaza envelope. There's a lot of kibbutzes there, and my family lives in two of them. My father's side of the family, okay? Most of my close family, they live further up north in the central coastal plain, and my parents as well. But my father's side of the family, they live there in that area. And she said, I'm returning when the last of the Palestinians is annihilated. I don't care if it's children, elderly, handicapped on crutches who came to loot. All of them, I have no empathy. I have no mercy for anyone at this point. And she was saying, she was reflecting that she's like shaking. She says to the interviewer, I'm shaking because I don't come from that background. And we also educated our children to want, for peace and stuff like that. But right now, she didn't stand that test. She wanted genocide. There is no other way to translate what she wanted there. But and Nir Meir, the leader of the kibbutz movement, whom I cited, he says many people think like that. So I heard it from some of them. I heard it also from others. I'm not going to quote some other people. But what I'm saying is that this rhetoric, it wasn't just in conversations. I'm telling you, this is from mainstream TV.
Yeah.
It used to come from that extreme settler right that you're talking. It used to be. Half a year before that, I think it was just end of February, beginning of March 2023, there was a case in the West Bank in Huwara where one Palestinian murdered two settlers in a junction. They were driving in a car. They were young. I think they were under 20 in a car, and I think he was never the perpetrator was never found, or the suspect. But never mind. They did a pogrom there. So Bezalel Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, who also has a ministerial post as a de facto governor of the West Bank, he repeated another settler leader, and they said, erase Huwara. Erase Huwara. So hundreds of cars burned, they're burning houses, they killed one person, it could have ended with more deaths.
This is worse than the biblical eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This is like revenge on an enormous scale.
It's kind of like Amalek, But I just want to say about the Huwara, it was widely noticed, also in Israel. Left-wing people protested against it, mentioned it.
The left wing normally being the section who are more protective maybe of Palestinians, no?
Yeah, with that kind of legacy. And they said, they thought that was, they're extremists. So then Smotrich was challenged, and he said, at first he tried to walk a bit back, and he said, well, I said to erase Huwara, but I didn't mean that citizens would do it. I meant that the military would do it.
Oh, right.
Okay, right.
Great.
But it was seen in that light as very extremist, and that's not Israel, right? But come October 7th, then you are seeing these kibbutzniks say exactly what Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich were saying.
Yeah.
And those guys were saying, what did we tell you? When the test comes, we're right.
And you believe like us. So is there any true opposition left in Israel to what Israel is carrying out in Gaza and the West Bank? Any true, real, deep felt, active opposition? Does that exist in Israel?
First of all, it exists. But let's analyze its size, its message, and its function. First of all, if you look at the polls, we need to look at the facts. I cover these polls and occasionally, and write about them. Israeli polls. Recent one is from Israeli Democracy Institute. I think it was back in June or July, something. 4 out of 5 Jewish Israelis are not concerned with starvation in Gaza.
4 out of 5, they don't care.
Yeah.
That
79%.
That children and grown-ups are starving next door to them.
It's not because they haven't seen it. They've been showing it more and more in mainstream channels with some concern sometimes. Sometimes they outright mock it. The right-wing channel 14, which is like a Radio Rwanda channel, but trusted by 40% of the Israeli, I think it's generally the Israeli public for being a reliable news channel. Highly incisive genocidal channel. They were mocking it. They were going like, oh, did you see the photo? Let's see the photo of the starving child with his mother. Right? But look at his mother. Look at his mother. She's I would say she's a bit obese. Yes, she is. I think, and then they start joking with each other. Yeah, I think that mother, she must have eaten a goat or something. Oh yeah, she ate her child. That's the level. So, but I'm telling you now, the general public, Israeli, Jewish public, 4 out of 5 are not concerned. But when
they
you
don't
look,
care about
but yeah, but when you looked at the Palestinian public, I mean, now in 48 Israel, so the Palestinians who have state citizenship, who are Israeli citizens,
yes.
when they're asked about their concern, so it's more than 80%. It's like 86% they are concerned, of course. So you have in that same country people who are not concerned about starving babies and people who are obviously concerned. So the opposition from that public, okay, it's about 20%, maybe under 20%. Those Palestinian citizens. But what can their concern do, right? So that's the Palestinian Israeli public, okay? And then there is the left wing of the Jewish Israeli public, which is mostly Zionist, almost not anything else than Zionist.
And being Zionist means what? Believing you have a right to the land, or what exactly does it mean to be a Zionist?
Yeah, okay. If you pause that question for a moment, we'll get back to it. But I just want to say that in this Jewish Israeli public, so the Palestinian vote, the Palestinian opinion, those who are citizens,
yes,
doesn't really matter. They are typically excluded from any political meaningful function. So if you have in those protests, they call them protests against the war, but that can be very misleading, because if you see the focus of those protests,
yes,
it is, and you need to translate this verbatim from Hebrew, it is to release the kidnapped.
Yes.
Shichrur hachatufim. We translate it to release of the hostages, even if they're military captives, the hostages. No, they're even more. They say just the kidnapped. They're not. They have no concern about the 10,000 kidnapped Palestinians. Most of them are actually just kidnapped by a military occupation that has no legal process of any value.
So you're talking about the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners?
Yeah, and sometimes they don't have a trial at all. Many of them, like 3,500 of them, just don't have any trial.
So they're just kept captive?
Yeah, they're kept as bargaining chips and captives. And under systemic torture, okay? So they're protesting, this Israeli Jewish public is mostly protesting for, at best, to get their own back. Yes. Exactly how is a question of, that's a mute subject. There is a little block that is spelling out genocide, but it is a little block. It is really a little block.
So it's this small block in amongst Jewish Israelis still living in Israel who are actually protesting what is happening, what is being done against the Palestinians. It's such a small part of Israeli society.
Yes, those who actually have concern for the Palestinians,
Yes.
I would say they are protesting the genocide, but they are just a tiny few.
Yeah.
Those who say we release the kidnapped, they are concerned with their own. And that means that even in the protest,
Yes.
the weight of the focus is not on Palestinians. It's a continuance of the dehumanization, of the evaporation, conceptually and physically, of the Palestinians. That's why there's no internal meaningful mechanism, because there is enough support, despite the tiredness, despite it being hard to get the reservists, and despite that, there is enough fanatic support for the genocide to keep it going, and externally too. It has to have external support. But you asked about Zionism, and I'll just...
Yes, my question was, what does it actually mean to be a Zionist? If it means that
Yes.
you believe you have the right to the land, and that Palestinians must be gotten rid of somehow, what does it mean to be a Zionist these days?
Okay. Zionism had, you can say, to be totally fair historically, that it had different facets, and some of the early Zionists before 1948, they envisioned a binational arrangement. Yeah, binational model. Okay, movements like Brit Shalom and movements like Hashomer Atzair, but come 1948, they were basically taken out of any meaningful political representation. So
Who were?
those who sought, even spiritual Zionism, like not having a Jewish state, like Albert Einstein was one of those. So they were taken out of political influence. So Ben-Gurion's Zionism was the labor Zionism. It wasn't the right-wing Zionism. There was right-wing Zionism. He called them extremists. Right? But his mainstream labor Zionism defined the furthest you could go in leftism, a kind of socialist idea, yeah, but very racialized.
Very racialized, what does that mean? Racist?
What I mean, yeah, I would say absolutely racist. Remember, still this is a settler colonial movement. It has its socialist aspect as opposed to the more explicit fascistic aspect of the revisionist, Jabotinsky, which were leading up to Likud and Netanyahu's, that's not Netanyahu's heritage. But the labor Zionism, they also had their idea about what do we mean by Zionist labor, and the Histadrut, the main labor movement goal was to reach Hebrew work. That's what they called it, Avodah Ivrit, and they called it conquering of the work. That means conquering of the market from Palestinians, so that we eventually, we might use Palestinians here and there for cheap labor, which has been quite consistent in Israel's history, but organized in terms of organized rights and so on, it was thought of as keeping it for the Jews, with the euphemism of Hebrews, like Semites or whatever, but they used the term Hebrew, but they meant Jews. So Jewish work, that was the ideal. And so about Zionism, this is about Zionism. So I was saying there have been these movements that sought to more to integrate with the natives, with the Palestinians, but that was taken out of political function in 1948. And I think that I like to take Benny Morris' summary of what he says about transfer in relation to Zionism. Because Benny Morris is one of those new historians often spoken of with people like Ilan Pape, Avi Schleim, Tom Segev, who found who looked at newly released archives in the late 80s from 1948 and pointed out, hey, there was actually this Nakba. It's not just a Palestinian narrative.
What is the Nakba?
Okay, wait, you can't do it that fast. I'm still with Zionism. I will return. You're too fast. So Benny Morris, in 2004, he formulated what is transfer in relation to Zionism. It's in his book, which is called The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited, because the original one came out in 87. So now he had a revised version. And he said, let me see if I can remember this precisely. Transfer...
Sounds like a euphemism.
What?
Sounds like a bit of a euphemism, transfer.
Yeah, it's his euphemism for ethnic cleansing. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
Exactly.
Because Zionism sought to create a Jewish state in a place which was overwhelmingly Arab, and the creation of the Jewish state could not occur without a major displacement of that Arab population. So, if you understand this logic, you understand that you can talk about integration and cooperation and binationalism, but your whole project has an inevitable and inbuilt aspect which is called, he calls it transfer, and I call it ethnic cleansing. And
so no matter how left-leaning, how liberal, how supposedly peace-seeking certain parts of Israeli society is or has been, it was always, the entire society of Israel was always based on the idea of ethnic cleansing, is basically what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I would say more, that I don't think there is a question today, it maybe 2 decades ago, I don't think there is a question today that there was an ethnic cleansing campaign in 1948.
And that's what being called the Nakba.
Yes.
The catastrophe.
Yes. Okay, let's get to your... That is the Nakba of 1948.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about roughly 750,000 Palestinians being ethnically cleansed from the areas which would then become Israel per beginning of 1949. So the amount of Palestinians who were living there in those areas before that ethnic cleansing was around 900,000 in those areas, okay? In the whole of historical Palestine it was more like 1.35 million, but in those areas. Mm-hmm. So you had 150, 160,000 left, right? Mm-hmm. They became under military regime in the first 2 decades, okay? Another story. But so those 750,000 people, they are expelled. They become refugees.
How were they expelled? How was that done?
Violently expelled with systematic overtakings of villages and massacres. It wasn't always a massacre, but they knew that massacres were awaiting them, especially like after Deir Yassin on the 9th of April in 48. They heard about it, you know.
Is that why some people said that during the Nakba, Israeli committed terrorism by scaring away people?
Yeah, it was defined as terrorism in those times, you know, but by the powers that be. Mm-hmm. It was under the British mandate. It was definitely seen as such. And some seen as more terrorists than others, you know. So Menachem Begin, of the leader of the Irgun, of the kind of more right-wing faction of Zionism. So he was called, a fascist by Hannah Arendt and Albert Einstein in their letter of that year, and having a ideology that resembles that of the Nazis and all that, but.
So Hannah Arendt and Albert Einstein said that actually.
Yeah, they wrote it. When Begin he was going to visit in New York for fundraising.
And Arendt, obviously being the author of the book The Banality of Evil, describing how seemingly normal people just did their bidding to carry out the Nazi onslaught and the Holocaust.
Yeah,
that was Hannah Arendt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there was this image of those are the extremists once again, but there's this the more mainstream Zionism under Ben Gurion. They're just fighting the good fight, right? But they were actually the ones who were more systematic in the ethnic cleansing. So one example of it is the Tentura massacre. This happened on the night between 22 and 23 of May 1948. It was part of a whole campaign of ethnically cleansing the coastal plain, right? Where that kibbutz where I was born is.
So they were paving the way for your kibbutz.
In a way, yes. Because the village Khirbet al-Manshia, which was under my feet when I was born, I didn't know it existed there. Yeah. It was ethnically cleansed in, I think it was 15th of April 1948. And I only found out about that village about, I think, 6 years ago. But Tentura, the Tentura massacre, for many years there was this controversy about it. And Benny Morris, he relies upon almost like obsessively on Israeli state archives. So if they didn't mention the massacre, or if you look at what they reported there, it's just like, oh, we just came, we had a little fight, 5 of us died, and we went home. But we're talking about a massacre of hundreds.
Yeah.
And for years it's been like a controversy, and actually my friend living close in another kibbutz, Ted Katz, he did a master thesis on this in the late 90s, on this massacre. And then the veterans, they went against him, they did a libel case against him. No, there was no massacre. But recently, there was a film, it's quite known now, Tentura, I think it came out about 3-4 years ago. And for some reason, they just speak out about how they rounded up people and then torched them alive, and, liquidations, and, okay. So
all this time later, they finally tell the truth about what they did.
Now there's no controversy about it. Yeah, and there's a mass grave apparently under the parking lot of this kibbutz. Now it's another kibbutz. It's kibbutz Nachsholim. They have a very nice coast there, and they have a parking lot. Under that parking lot, there's a mass grave.
Wow.
The Jewish Israeli tour guide from Zichron Yaakov, nearby. Forgot his name. Forgive me. He went over there. He counted. I believe he counted about 230 bodies. And then he came there after 10 days, and he says, the whole thing. It was in the summer already, right? End of May. June, right? So the whole thing, the whole mound, expanded. It expanded. It grew because the bodies were they were
piling
brewing up in this heat.
So they were coming up from.
Yeah, well, the whole thing expanded rose upwards, and then it sunk again.
Wow.
But there's
that is so gruesome.
That's just one. That's just one case. That's not even the biggest massacre. There are other, like probably the biggest massacre. It's not Deir Yassin. It's actually the Waime. This happened on the 29th of October. Sorry, the UN made a mistake there. I think it was the 28th, Friday the 28th of October, 1948. And you have the most horrific descriptions from Israeli soldiers. Now it was the IDF. Israeli soldiers, and okay, you can read about it. But I wrote 2 articles about it. But it's just like, we smashed the heads of babies with sticks. We had a woman and her baby as a slave to clean the house. After a couple of days, when she did her work, we killed them both. Then there was an elderly, and we blew the house, but one didn't want to blow the house up, so the commander came over and blew the house on them. And so it's like, oh my God. And
how can you build a healthy society on that? On massacring another people? And then having them as your neighbors? Then of course you won't get rid of your neighbors. I just can't understand how a whole people can function like this, how a whole society, and how there can be this lack of self-reflection, and how it can be frowned upon to point out how much this mimics what the Jewish people itself went through during the Holocaust. It's like one big...
What you're saying now is something that was almost precisely said by an Israeli minister at the time. Because they were talking about this massacre in November, just a few weeks after, in the Mapam party.
Back in
1948. And there was a minister of agriculture, he's called Aharon Zisling. And they were discussing this because they got a testimony from an Israeli soldier. And he was saying, yeah, this is like totally reliable, intelligent, educated person, and he's telling us unbelievable things, what I was just telling you, and Zisling is saying, like, my whole being is shaken. Jews behaved like Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, they killed also hundreds of people there, but they saw this. Some people made the connection. But they thought that somehow, okay, we're shaken, but maybe that's what we do in war, and war is terrible. In the end...
And with the victims, eternally.
In the end, Ben-Gurion just gave amnesty to all those people, and that's it. We start a new chapter.
And then they build a society upon those mass graves.
Yeah, and you asked about ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
And what I want to say about this is that even though the direct, violent ethnic cleansing, I don't even want to use those adjectives that people often do, barbaric and all that. Okay, let's just say direct and violent ethnic cleansing. Even though it took place in 48, that one, there were others, then Israel would not allow the rolling back of that result. Right? So it was accepted to the UN, and there was already a resolution in 1948. Yitzhak Shamir, who was a prime minister at a point, he got Volker Bernadotte murdered for this resolution, which called for the return of refugees. Okay, it's called Resolution 194.
So Volker Bernadotte was killed.
Yeah, he was
by a leading Israeli.
Yeah, he was murdered by the Irgun. It was. You had the IDF, but it was still operating. So they had the operators in Jerusalem, and they murdered him. And Bernadotte did the sketch and the work on this resolution that would both, take things, make Jerusalem a corpus separatum, like a separate city that is not controlled by Israel, because Israel took it over, and the return of refugees. This was a major thing, the return of the refugees. Okay, murdered, but still the resolution is there. And Israel, although accepted to the UN, supposedly, it promised everything. We'll respect the UN Charter, we'll respect the UN, we'll do everything. On that aspect, return of refugees, no way. So when you think about what it means to be an Israeli today and refuse to rectify that major founding ethnic cleansing, then what you're saying is that you are supporting that ethnic cleansing because you won't rectify it. And why
And
won't
you won't
do
give
it?
up what you gained by it.
You won't. You won't. And why? Exactly because what Benny Morris said. Because if you did that, then you risk the Jewish demographic majority, which is a cardinal condition for Zionism.
That they are the majority.
Yes.
So they can say we're Democrats, but we rule the roost.
It's like saying, we'll have our democracy, but it's got to be conditioned upon that.
That we are the majority.
Yes,
So we can run
and that majority is gained by ethnic cleansing. I just don't find a way around it.
And that's what Zionism is.
Yeah.
And what about the Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship? Do they have equal rights?
Well, people often, raise that issue to counter. Oh, there's a judge in the Supreme Court, because there's supposed to be one Arab, right?
Mm-hmm.
One Palestinian citizen in the Supreme Court, and they were, and they can vote and all of that. But in fact, no, they do not. And if you look at Dalah, it's a organization, Israeli-Palestinian organization about Palestinian rights. In Israel, they have a database. You can check the discriminatory laws database. You can search it.
Uh-huh.
Over 60 laws which are discriminatory in one way or another to citizens in one way or another. And in 2018, I think that discussion was finally closed, because there came the nation-state law. We have is it a buzzing or?
Yeah, it's my son calling. I'll talk to
Oh,
him
okay,
afterwards.
that's okay. So we had the nation-state law, which basically defined that the only ones with national rights in Israel are the Jews, because Israel is the nation-state of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So those who are not Jews, and of course the Palestinians, within that, they have citizenship rights, but not national rights. And what does that exactly mean? Because it's hard, I think it's hard for many people to understand. What are you talking about? Like, either you're a citizen or not. Well, no. You're a full citizen with national rights only if you are a Jew. If you're not, you have all kinds of limitations, also in relation to land laws, and you have limitations in relation to the law of return. That's one of the biggest ones. Israel has the law of return from, is it 1951, I think? Or 50, yeah. Any Jewish person, even if they didn't come from Israel, they can return to Israel, because it's the nation state of the Jewish people. So they can return to Israel. And it's been expanded in the 1970s.
So they have a right to return, but the Palestinians don't.
No, exactly. So they can come, and we'll call it return. And in the 1970s, it was expanded, like, usually if you would say a Jew by the Jewish Orthodox definition, which is the Orthodox rabbinate is kind of the dominant one in Israel, and it has the political monopoly and all that. Okay, so by Orthodox Judaism, it's if your mother is Jewish. It's a very simple racial definition, okay?
Yes.
Blood definition. If you had a Jewish father, okay, but it depends upon if your mother was Jewish.
Yes. What about a convert to Judaism?
Okay, so if you convert by Orthodox means, then you can, but they don't take in Palestinians, because they systematically suspect them for wanting to just get a right of return. Okay, but the law of return, as expanded in I think it was 1970 or in the 70s, it expanded the definition to a kind of mirror of the Nuremberg laws. Okay, so it's not just if you have a Jewish mother, it's also if you have a Jewish father. You don't have to have a Jewish mother, you can have a Jewish father.
Oh.
No, not just that, you can also have a Jewish father's father
Oh.
You can go 2 times per
And then you have the
paternal,
right to
and
live in Israel.
yes, and you'll be considered a Jew by law of return, and then you can take your spouse and your children. They'll also be written in. So they expanded that. So it's very maximalist, but it's very minimalist. There's no law of return for the Palestinians. There's law of non-return. I'm just saying it as a kind of
I understand.
expression.
What about the two-state solution? That is always mentioned as in the West as this is how we solve this. Is it even possible?
Show me the times, because I want to.
Well, it's just after 5.
Okay, good. Because this is something that you could do a talk about just on its own.
We will. Give us a brief,
But
response.
I would say about this two-state solution. So we talked a little bit. We talked about it in relation to 1982 in Lebanon. Remember, PLO
Yes.
accepts it, and then this peace process,
Accepts to
which
leave.
actually starts in 1990s, and then the Oslo Accords in 1993, 1995, and the Oslo Accords were a kind of interim agreement. They were not a final agreement. They said within 5 years, so from 95 it would be like until 2000, there should be the final negotiations, and then there will be this solution. But already in 1995, Yitzhak Rabin, and this is just a month before he was murdered. He was murdered on the 5th of November. 5th of November 1995. Just a month before that, in 5th October or something, he promised the parliament that these Oslo Accords, they will result in less than a state for the Palestinians.
Oh.
So the Palestinians were to recognize Israel, which they did, in treaty, in writing.
Uh-huh.
But Israel was not to recognize Palestine.
Uh-huh.
It was just to recognize PLO as a sole negotiator for the Palestinians.
And
So it wasn't yet there. You see.
So Israel only accepted an organization.
Yeah.
As a negotiator.
Supposedly to reach this so-called two-state solution, but the real goal, at best, was always, and this is not just under Rabin. This is. You go to Likud and you go to Begin and you go to Netanyahu. The real goal was always at best a kind of autonomy with isolated cantons separated from about
West Bank now.
165 holes in the cheese.
Yeah.
Surrounded by from all directions. Of course, we want the Jordan Valley and in between and all that for security reasons. And you call that a state.
Yeah.
And it's like the real model is Bantustans. It's an apartheid state of Bantustans, surrounded Bantustans. So Ariel Sharon once said to an Italian, I think it was the Italian Prime Minister, that this is our model.
The form of South African apartheid system. Or the
Bantustan model is our model. But anyway, it was, that was Israel's idea about that. And this is also the purpose of those settlements. But now it's like some people still believed in it, and many people who believed in it in the past maybe they're not saying it out loud, but there's what's his name? I forgot, a UN official who resigned in 2023. Greg Mohiber. He was working in the UN. I think UN High Commissioner office in New York. He was a high official, and he resigned. He said the UN has failed, and this two-state solution, it's become the joke in the UN corridors.
Uh-huh.
It's something that people say so that they wouldn't be called anti-Semite. No, I'm saying it. I'm saying this.
Mm-hmm.
That because when they say two-state solution, they declare that they support there should be a Jewish state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because if they would say a one-state solution, that state would if it's a democratic one-state solution, with the population between the river and the sea right now, it's not a Jewish majority anymore.
My question is that there's also, for instance, in Denmark, the politicians in Europe who use the two-state solution to not insist, to cover up for the fact that they don't roll back the colonialist project like we have rolled back other colonialist projects over time and given it back to the original people, which in this case would be the Palestinians. So it's also a cover-up for the non-action in the West, it seems. The use of this, always saying, oh, but they just have to share the land, and then leave it at that.
Yeah. Even, there's different views about this also amongst Palestinians, and the Fatah movement is more about the two-state, and Hamas, by the way, has accepted de facto the two-state solution, saying that it's not what they would have wanted, but they see it, even in their charter of 2017, they see it as a matter of national consensus. So they become a little pragmatic in that way, say what you want.
Because it seems that Israel always have all the cards on their hand, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is the point, that whichever solution, whether it's a two-state, three-state, 35-state or one-state solution, whichever solution you're talking about, the balance of powers, as it is today, is such that Israel can do whatever it wants.
Let's leave it at that. We've had a long day. I will return to you with further questions on another day. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.